Well, I mean, lots of sympathy for the Duke and Duchess of Suffolk and Mrs. Markle. I, I, given what happened to the Duke of Sussex's mother, I can only imagine how harrowing it must have been for him. And I only know that as much as I've seen in the sort of breaking news in the afternoon, but I can imagine for him and his family, it must have been very harrowing indeed. I'm sorry to hear that it happened.
The Prince's taxpayer-funded protection was removed when he stepped back as a senior royal and left the UK to go to the United States. Is that the kind of thing that maybe should be re-looked at, given what's happened?
Oh, look, I think, Sophie, impossible to offer that sort of reaction on the fly when all I've done is seen the breaking news. I think it's appropriate to offer my sympathies and to say how awful it must have been. But without knowing any of the circumstances, impossible to comment on behalf of the government about what the security implications may be.
OK, understood. As you say, a fast-moving story. We'll be following lots of developments on that, of course. The Defence Secretary is in Germany and discussing continued support for Ukraine. What are the kinds of things that we're looking at?
Well, I mean, he is in Germany to discuss many things, not least the future of NATO. There's an important conference coming up in a month or so's time. But any conversation on Euro-Atlantic security clearly revolves around what's going on in Ukraine. There is a donor community, the UK and Germany, both very prominent within it, that are giving enormous amounts of kit to the Ukrainians. And Ben and Minister Pistorius will have been having discussions about what that looks like as the offensive goes on this summer. And obviously, you've seen from Ben's comments that long-range weapons, the artillery ammunition and air defence systems, and of course fighter jets are very much the live conversation.
What is the live conversation when it comes to fighter jets, then?
Well, I think the conclusion that the Ukrainians have come to is that they would very much like to operate F-16, and there are a number of nations that operate F-16 that have indicated a willingness in principle to provide them. The UK doesn't operate F-16, and so what we've said is that we will assist in the pilot training pipeline to help pilots to learn to fly in the first place, and then, of course, countries that operate F-16 will need to do the special to type training thereafter. And although we don't have any of those jets to donate ourselves, there are clearly things that we can support the countries that do donate those jets, either through providing some Royal Air Force capability to backfill any lost capability on their part, or to support the maintenance and arming of those jets once donated.
You talked there about the enormous support that the UK has offered to Ukraine. Your new procurement minister said today the refresh of the MOD's defence review, so the Defence Command paper, should be released by the end of June. Are there going to be cuts to personnel or equipment in order to balance the books?
Well, look, the process of looking at the future of our armed forces, making sure that we have properly learnt the lessons from Ukraine, that all of the innovation that we've assisted the Ukrainians in making with their forces and that have had such effect in the fight in Ukraine are quickly absorbed into the UK armed forces as well. So it'd be premature, in fact, until the data publication, it would be completely wrong to say what those conclusions exactly are. But I suspect that your viewers, whatever their concern may be about the shape, size of the Army, Navy, Air Force, would agree that it is entirely incumbent on us to, A, make sure that everything that we've learned from Ukraine is reflected as quickly as possible in our own armed forces, and that, B, we recognise that since we published the last Defence Command paper, the world has become ever more insecure and ever more unstable, and so we need to make sure that we are gearing ourselves against all of those threats, and that's exactly what we're doing in the work we've got going on the command paper refresh at the moment.
So just stripping away what you're talking about, you're not ruling out cuts then, are you?
No, I mean, I'm not ruling cuts out, I'm not ruling increases out. I'm saying that we are on a technology threshold at the moment. There is lots of amazing things coming into use in all sectors of the economy with automation and artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Computing power is improving exponentially, which means the ability to sort of crunch data and thus to target more effectively means that something that might previously have taken 10 artillery guns and 100 rounds might in the future be achieved by a couple of guns with 20 rounds. That's the order of magnitude of change that might be possible. And what we're doing in the MOD with the brilliant scientists that we've got in the Defence Science and Technology laboratories and with our brilliant people in defence intelligence is to try to understand all of those emerging technologies as much as we can, see how they've been employed in Ukraine and apply those to our force.
A big part of the things that you're looking at. Rishi Sunak is on his way to the G7 in Japan. How helpful do you think it is that his predecessor, Liz Truss, is at the very same time giving a speech in Taiwan, making comments about his foreign policy approach?
Well, Liz is now a backbencher, and as a parliamentarian, she is entirely in her rights to speak. And I think it is, when we're faced with the autocratic oppression that we see from Putin, the idea that a government minister should try and say that this particular member of parliament shouldn't be travelling and saying what is on her mind is clearly not the way we do business in this democracy. The Prime Minister will go to the G7 and speak for the nation. Liz is in Taiwan reflecting her personal view.
Understood. And there's a couple of domestic issues that I'll be keen to get your view on as well, and talk about the big changes that you've made to the rental market today. We'll be talking to a housing campaigner, Quajo, later on the programme, and he made quite a good point, I thought that I would steal and put to you. He said local authorities have had their funding slashed over the last 13 years. Look at the state of social housing. They are now under pressure to enforce this bill and monitor landlords. Will they be given the funding needed to do this? What's your answer to that?
Well, I can't give you the answer that the housing minister would give you. I can give you a pretty good answer about the impacts of quantum computing on the modern battle space, but the exact detail of deluxe policy, I can't. What I can say...
It's not a huge... look, I'm not expecting you to know every single dotted I and crossed T in the housing policy, but I think it is a fair question to say, look, if you actually want this to work, you're going to need local authorities to be funded properly to do it, right?
Well, before you come in, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I think that obviously when you bring in any sort of reform like this, you want to consult widely and make sure that it is going to work. This, as I understand it, is a proposal that has indeed taken some time to develop. And so I would expect that the point that your contributor makes is either one that has already been considered in the development of the policy or is something that the department will be keen to engage with to make sure that it is going to work for local authorities in the way that he suggests it may not.
OK, understood. And then just finally, there has been a lot of speculation that net migration could hit as high as 1 million next week. This is legal immigration, of course, important to make that distinction. Given that it's legal, should we be relaxed about how high that number goes?
Well, look, I think that there has been a lot of effort in government to make sure we shut down on illegal migration. That is the bit that I think the public react to as being unfair, inappropriate, and it's right that they expect their government to control their borders. As for what our requirements are when it comes to legal migration, I think there are lots of economic arguments for why we do need workforce to meet the needs of certain sectors. But clearly, we have to also make sure that we are not missing the opportunity to improve our productivity and drive innovation into our workplace by taking advantage of cheap migrant labour. Now, my sense is from what I've seen of the debate playing out within government that that is very much the balance that the government is trying to strike. I think it's invidious to say that a certain number is too much or that there should be a ceiling or that we should be aiming for a target that is significantly lower. We should do what is needed for our economy whilst recognising that the answer to a labour shortage isn't always more migration, actually focusing on issues of productivity and automation and technology in the workplace is similarly important.